Hi everyone, my name's Simon, I'm the founder of Horoma Studio, and today I'm sharing with you our first rendering teardown video for the October batch. So first thing first, I'd like to thank you all for your submissions, because last Monday it only took like a couple of hours to get all your submissions for this month. So it's really encouraging for us to see how eager you are to get some feedback on all your images. So that's, yeah, a good thing for us, and we're definitely gonna continue and keep on doing this rendering teardown series. So to jump straight to this image we're dealing with, we have this pretty nice shopping mall inner street. So basically there are a couple of things I'm going to talk about. The first one is going to be composition. So composition here is pretty interesting because it's quite straightforward and efficient. As you can see, we're looking straight into the this alley here, and it's sort of curving, so you have like a nice effect created, which is sort of working. There's only one tiny thing I think that is not working properly here, and that's sort of because the rest of the image is quite balanced. I mean, we have like this sort of rule of third thing here, which is quite efficient. We might want to have a little bit more of the ground though, but still it's pretty balanced. The thing here that I'm sort of that I find confusing is the tiling of the ground here. As you can see, there's like two problems with it. Is that the texture is a little bit too much repetitive, so that's something I would try to avoid. And the other thing is that basically when you have parallel lines in your images, it's always gonna like catch the eye, or at least lead the eye to look at somewhere. So here you can see it's going that way, and well, basically nothing's happening here. So what you want to avoid, so that's what you want to avoid. So what could be interesting is to actually maybe get like a curved pavement or something like that, so that you actually emphasize the idea of the concepts of the architecture here, which is to sort of revolve around this building here. So yeah, if that's something that would, I guess, enhance the overall idea. Little tiny detail here is also that you can see the horizontals are not perfectly horizontal, which is something that actually catches the eye a little bit too much, and that you have to be quite careful with. Basically, always check your verticals here. So as you can see here, this is okay. But also, if you're sort of facing something, just be careful that this sort of goes there, and that your horizontals are horizontals. Otherwise, it's going to feel a little bit weird. I think that's pretty much for composition. What we're going to talk about now is the entourage. So, I think the main problem with this image is twofold. The first problem is basically in terms of animation. It is actually quite tricky here because you have a shopping mall, so you want it to be lively, but at the same time you cannot really overpopulate it, because otherwise it's gonna, like, the project is not going to be legible. So what you need to do is basically, instead of having individuals here and just like not really interacting neither with the architecture nor with the with each other's, what you have to do is basically try to create like groups of people, or at least make them look at the architecture, like if they're browsing through all the shops, or like if they're talking to each other. They need to be some sort of interactions, otherwise it's not going to, like, even though you put people, it's not going to feel lively. So I would suggest trying to create some sort of clusters of people here and there, and just animate it a little bit differently. Basically the idea here is just to create some sort of stories of like just basically people going to the mall. So you can have like people, yeah, this guy is sort of okay, and like it does make sense, but all these guys are alone, so that's, I guess, something that's a little bit odd. The second thing I think that is kind of problematic is the the 3D models, because well, it's still like a personal advice, but I would really advise not to like really avoid using 3D models for people, because they're super weird. At least that, like, this dude here is a little bit creepy. It's the problem with it is that basically first 3D models of people are always going to be quite expensive. Whether like if you just get 2D cutouts, it's going to be much cheaper, or like you get like tons of them, and it's going to be like much more versatile in terms of usage. So what you can do here is, yeah, I would just not use this kind of people. They're a little bit like when you use low polygons people, it's just like it's gonna be feel out of context, even though you're gonna get like the proper lighting from like a 3D generated lighting. It's just like it's gonna feel pretty well integrated, but still like the model itself is not really selling, so a little bit off-putting. So I would definitely try to, like, this is something you can achieve like with Photoshop on a 2D cutout, so it's just not the best the best advantage to think of when you're using 3D model. It's the same here with the tree. I guess there's a couple of things that is a little bit off here. First, it's like not really well, like it would have to be a little bit further here, because the roots cannot really go, like they can go under the pavements, but still would go, this will shift a little bit up, so you should still like put it a little bit further. And the thing is, it's the same that with this kind of low polygon, it's usually the cutouts for trees are of better quality, so I would advise to use them instead of using directly 3D models. That way you have much more flexibility when you're using, because you can just switch it off if it just doesn't work. So I guess that's pretty much it for the Entourage. I'm not like saying 3D model people never work, but I would really be careful with that. Now I guess we can switch to the contrast, hue, and usual saturation of the image. So if we have a little look at our contrast first, we can see that the image is quite balanced, although there's something a little bit that I would change a little bit, is that here you get this sort of interesting canopy, but you don't get the like the translucency effect you would sort of expect. So it has to do a little bit with the actual texturing of the image, but still, what could be interesting, I think, that could add a little bit of depth, would be to sort of create some sort of God rays, just to add a little bit of depth and maybe a little bit of diversity in the lighting, because it cannot be this homogeneous. So as you can see, if you just like do something a little bit like that, you start to get some interesting effects. It doesn't have to be this conspicuous, because it's always more interesting when it's quite subtle. But as you'll see in the end, like if I have that here, as you can see, it's just a second. It's a little bit different, but there's more like, yeah, depth, I guess. The other thing you can do as well is to, this is like burn-in dodge tools are really something you have to, you basically have to use them anyway. It can be like extremely subtle, but still it's always going to increase the believability of your image, because you can create some sort of variations pretty quickly. Whether you use your dodge tool, your burn tool, sorry, here, just to get some sort of a variation in your concrete here, or in your bricks here, and just sort of recreate a sense of contrast that you kind of lost in a too neat 3D rendering, like raw rendering. So that's something can be interesting, and the dodge tool is especially interesting when you're trying to create, like we use this levels here, our curves, to get some sort of light rays, but you can also use the dodge tool to create some sort of, not flares, but something kind of similar, but a little bit more subtle, I guess. So just to sort of highlight some pavings here and stuff like that. So that's something quite simple, but still, as you can see, it makes quite a tremendous difference. So that's it for the contrast. What we can have a look at now is the saturation. Yep. Basically, in terms of, so this filter here just shows the overall saturation of the image. A couple of things you have to keep in mind is that basically the saturation is quite homogeneous, and only the really bright colors are going to stand out, which basically means in a daylight scene, only your blue sky is going to stand out. So that's what you sort of have here, even though it's a little bit, you could actually get more saturated here in the blue. What is a little bit not really accurate is the grass here. As you can see, it's quite saturated, so you might want to adjust your saturation here a little bit less, and just use that on your grass here, and you'll see the difference it makes. It's going to be quite interesting. As you can see here, we go from something that is sort of like way too bright to something that is sort of okay. And you could actually use it as well, because as you can see here, these plants here are a little bit too bright as well, so something you want to avoid. Here as well, here as well. As you can see, like the only thing that makes sense for them to be super bright are these sort of really conspicuous reds here and here, so that you can actually keep. And the other thing, I guess, that I will finish with is the overall, like the colors are not really, I don't know, I think it's a little bit too cold for, as you can see, there's a lot of blue, whereas you might want it to feel a little bit warmer, so maybe it's just like a simple photo filter to get, you know, like, as you can see, it's really simple, but it does make a difference. So as you can see, I think we're gonna finish here, because the improvement is quite noticeable, and I think it's okay. The difference we have before and after, you just have to imagine, you know, having like some sort of more subtle animation, and I guess we're going to be having like a pretty cool image. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Thank you guys, and see you next time.
Tonight,